let's dive into this. Let's dive into ketones. Let's go just a high level for the audience. I think most of the audience is pretty familiar with ketones, but can you just give like the overview, maybe a little comp, and like people know coffee's an energy booster or pre-workout. Like, give us just like the whole kind of high level of ketones, and then we'll dive into some studies, high athletic performance, all kinds of different stuff.
Sounds good. So basic ketone 101. Ketones are essentially a superfuel. If you think about fuel for your bodies, you will always think about fats, glucose, and proteins, right? Those are macronutrients that your body can use directly and metabolize them and create ATP, which is the energy source in the cells. Ketones can also be metabolized and create ATP. The difference is when ketones are present in the body, it has been shown that certain organs, including the muscle, the heart, and the brain, they preferentially take up ketones because they find ketones to be more efficient in creating in creating energy, and also at the same time having some signaling properties that we can get into later on metabolism and metabolic health. So that's ketones in general. So where do ketones come from? Is this a new drug or no? Ketones have been around from as long as the first animal or first organisms that can metabolize fat, because it is being broken down from fat in your liver, and it creates a shorter version of a fatty acid, if you would, so that your body can use it for energy. Now, why is ketone being created? It's because when you are low on glucose and glycogen stores, your brain primarily function on glucose, but when it's low, it needs some other energy sources. So what other energy sources are there? Fats and proteins. Proteins you want to keep as long as possible without metabolizing it, because that is your muscle and all that. You don't want to start burning your muscles already, right? So you can use fat. However, fats are so big in size, the molecules cannot bypass the blood-brain barrier. So in order to create fuel that the brain can use, the body then converts fat into ketones and send it out to the brain to be metabolized. So having said that, the physiological condition at which you have to be in order to create ketones is that your body has to be very low on sugar. So either you are doing intermittent fasting or doing a ketogenic diet where you're severely restricting your glucose intake. And that way you are producing your own endogenous ketones. So the word endogenous refers to the internal production of ketones. If we're talking about Ketone IQ, which is ketone supplementation, it's an exogenous ketone. Now, because of technology, we're able to create ketone, the molecule, outside of your body. That way, you can just directly consume it regardless of your physiological state. Whether or not you have glucose in your body, you can still have the benefit of ketones and have access to all these ketones.
Yeah, I love it. It's kind of like, like high level in people are familiar with the ketosis, ketogenic diet. It's basically it's that benefit you're able to kick it into gear with Ketone IQ. So let's talk about sports performance. What have you seen? And maybe it can be in studies that you've done, but just in like mind-blowing type of situations where people were using Ketone IQ or had high level of ketones, and you're just like, oh my gosh, that is like I did not think that could. Have there been any of those type of moments?
Yeah, we have. We have athletes who have used it. Anecdotally, they have experienced how subjectively better they feel, how much more alert they feel. Obviously, there are also studies that have been published already in endurance sports, mainly because we have shown that ketones increase the performance in endurance exercises. It increases glycogen sparing, which means your glycogen depletes slower as you are exercising. Therefore, you can have a tank for a longer run. But recently, as of, I believe, in January, we published a paper with University of North Georgia looking at anaerobic exercise. So for the first time in history, we are looking at anaerobic exercise. The reason being, why is it first time in history, is because, as I said earlier, ketones came from fat, right? So we're thinking fat is more usable in an endurance setting, an aerobic setting, rather than a high intensity anaerobic setting. When it's high intensity anaerobic exercise, our bodies will automatically choose to use glucose, which is still true to this day, by the way. However, when we give these participants ketone IQ, we have experienced that these participants not only have higher average power, they also have higher peak power, higher cadence, as well as lower fatigue index. And the experiment specifically is a Wingate test. So they have to go on a stationary bike, they sprint for 10 seconds as hard as they could, rest for 30 seconds, and go back on for 10 seconds, do this for 5 sets. And we measure their performance, their sort of power, their cadence, and the fatigue index. And all across the board, we saw an improvement when they're given ketone IQ. Now, do note that these participants were not on keto diet; they're on a normal diet, and they were given standard breakfast a few hours before the experiment as well, so they are not fasted.